Welcome to the Doc Fitness podcast, where it's all about developing your mindset, training and nutritional knowledge so you can lose body fat and build muscle effectively while still living a real life. I am your host, David O'Connor. Now let's get into the show. How are we keeping, guys? And a big welcome back to the Doc Fitness podcast. And on this episode I have Jason Maxwell, who is an online personal trainer and online business coach as well. And I first came across Jason, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, through the Personal Trainer Development Center website, which is basically a website where it compiles like top articles and top content from around the web, and it used to kind of put weekly summary articles out there. And because some of my articles made that weekly summary in time, I was able to connect with Jason back then as well. So it's kind of cool how we're now recording a podcast all those years later. And I wanted to get Jason on to dive into everything around muscle hypertrophy, how to gain muscle tissue, kind of where to get started with it, etc, etc. And we decided just to take the approach of kind of working from a beginner, so like somebody who's never stepped foot in a gym before, and what they need to do to progress and build muscle tissue if that's their goal, into kind of like a more intermediate training phase. And kind of one thing I need to classify here as well is that when we say beginner, we mean somebody who is progressively adding more weight over time in the main compound movements with 3 main full body workouts a week is kind of usually what is classified as a beginner. So by that I mean like they're adding 1.25 to 2.5 to 5 kilos per session on their squat, bench and deadlift type stuff. That's what I mean by the compound movements. So again, if somebody's doing that for 6 to 12 months, that's kind of what's classified as a beginner, and they actually have progressed from doing 0 to squatting between 60 to 100 kilos in their first year of lifting, for example. Beyond that then is kind of what's classified as the intermediate style phase. So that's kind of what we mean when we get into that later in the podcast, and it's nice to kind of know what those classifications are. But for this episode, guys, we dive into kind of like just the mistakes that Jason would have went through, and kind of the biggest mistakes that we see when people are trying to gain muscle tissue. And from there, what are the main principles that we need to adhere to when it comes to muscle tissue gain? It's the same with fat loss. We know that there's an underwriting principle there of energy balance, that if we want to lose fat, we need to be in a caloric deficit. Same goes for muscle tissue gain. If we want to gain muscle tissue, we need to be in a caloric surplus. So like principles like that behind the training and the nutritional side of things, kind of rates, kind of what can we expect to gain if we're doing things right, all those kind of questions come into it. How to measure it, where to actually get started for someone who's in a beginner phase, what kind of movements you should be looking at, and then where and how to progress from there. So that's about it. I'm going to welcome Jason on the show, and let's dive in. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
No problem at all. And Jason, I'm not sure if you know this, but straight away I throw you into the deep end and I ask you in 10 seconds or less, what would you say it is that you do?
So I help skinny guys build muscle.
Nice. I was expecting something along those lines. That was probably the quickest one yet. That was, 2 seconds? Perfect.
It's actually not skinny guys. That was just in the top of my mind. It's I help guys build muscle.
Perfect.
Really simple.
Yeah, and Jason, I suppose first, before we get into that, a bit more context behind the way you help those guys build muscle, so we can give our guests a bit more context behind who Jason is and kind of where you got to where you are, or how you got to where you are now, so to speak.
Yeah. So you want to know a little bit of my story, like how I got into that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Perfect.
Okay. So it's so funny because if you go to my Instagram, it says former rocket scientist, and a lot of people think that's a joke, but it's not. I started my career I went to school for aerospace engineering, and I did that because I used to think that I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I did that, and I graduated top 3 in my class, and I remember I had a couple professors at my graduation come up to me, and they were saying, so Jason, like, do you want to be my master's student next year? And I was like, actually, no, I'm not getting my master's next year. And they're like, oh, great. So you got a job at like Bombardier or something? And I'm like, no, didn't get a job. They're like, okay, so what are you going to do? I'm going to be a personal trainer. And the look on their faces was just like perplexed. Like, why on earth would you want to be a personal trainer? And I knew I knew in my heart that's what I was meant to do. I knew I was meant to help people with their fitness, at least that time of my life. Because that's what I was truly passionate about. So I was following my passion and not following the money. And it was maybe a couple of years before that I started my blog. I think I was second year university. I started my blog, JMax Fitness, and I was just writing for that blog because I was interested in fitness. So it was more of a hobby. And then I found out I could actually make money doing that, make money doing what I love. So I started selling programs online. I became a personal trainer after university. I worked my way up. Within a year of graduating, I was working at the top gym in all of Toronto, like the top gym, the highest paid gym. And I remember thinking, I'm like, man, I made it. But a little part of me died inside because I was like, really? Like, this is like I'm at the top already and I can't really grow. Like, I can grow within the company. But I was looking at, like, I was working at 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. I loved what I did. I hated the hours. I felt like I didn't have freedom. And I was like, there's got to be something more. I got to be able to do something more. And you're capped with how many people you can help too when I was working in person. So I was like, you know what? The online business is doing pretty good. And we just had a brutal ice storm here in Toronto. So I said to my girlfriend, I was like, why don't we move to like the Mediterranean and I'll just build my online business there and get out there and help more people. And she's like, okay, I'm in. So we moved to this country called Malta and lived there for 3 years. And that's where I really blew up and just was able to get out there and get my name out there. And now I've helped, I say I've helped over 300,000 guys build muscle just because my following, I have over 300,000 people who follow me. So hopefully I've helped each of those people in a little bit at least. And it's just so amazing waking up every day knowing that I'm working on my passion and my purpose, which is fitness. It's really cool.
Fantastic. And like when you were finishing off your degree, did you just kind of start to maybe go to the gym around then, is it yourself, and kind of get a love for it, and that's how what kind of sparked you to go into the personal training? Was that where that started initially?
It wasn't then, but I'll tell you the exact moment. So I remember I was skinny fat. So I was a fat kid up until I hit puberty, and then once I hit puberty, I grew out of the fat kid, and I was just skinny fat. And I was like that up until I was like 18 or 19. I started working out when I was like 17, but I didn't really know what I was doing. All I would do is I would go to the gym. I would run on the treadmill for like half an hour. Then I would do a bunch of sit-ups. And then I would do a bunch of bicep curls and call it a day. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. So I didn't see any results then. And I always blamed it on my genetics. I was like, you know what? I can't look like these guys on TV. I would watch TV shows like The Bachelor or all these reality TV shows back then. And I would look at these guys and I'm like, they're just born that way. Like, I didn't put 2 and 2 together that if you worked out properly, you would look like that. I was like so ignorant towards that. And so what I did was I was like, okay, when I go away to university, my first year university, first semester, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to follow a program to the T. I'm going to follow a workout program, nutrition program. I'm going to do everything right, have 100% compliance. And if it doesn't work, well, you know what? Then it is my genetics. So I was like looking at this like a scientist, like trying to prove this program wrong. So I did it. And I went away to school in September, came back for Thanksgiving. So in the fall, I came back home, saw my family. I remember walking in the door of my house, and my brother looks at me and his jaw drops. And I'm like, yo, like, why are you looking at me so weird, dude? He's like, your neck, it's huge. I'm like, what? He's like, your neck is just huge. Like, you look so different. So I went and I looked at myself in the mirror, and up until that point. I saw myself every day in that mirror for like 3 years straight. And then I didn't look at myself in the mirror until that moment again. And that's when I really saw the difference. It's almost like looking at a before and after picture of you, because you're used to seeing a certain person in that mirror. And then all of a sudden I was looking in that mirror and I saw a completely different person. And that feeling I got when I actually noticed, like, holy crap, this works, was incredible. And the confidence, it just ignited inside me like that. It was the weirdest feeling. And I was like, I was addicted to that feeling. And I was like, I have to help other people feel this feeling. It was a life-changing experience. And if you're looking for like more stats, so I went away to school. I was 150 pounds, skinny fat. I came back, look at myself in that mirror. I was 177 pounds and I actually had an 8-pack. So I had abs for the first time in my entire life. So I don't know exactly how much muscle I gained or how much fat I lost, but looking at myself in the mirror, it was a completely different person. Like, I completely changed my body in those 3 months. So I responded really well. So obviously it wasn't my genetics holding me back. It was my actions and the program I followed and all of that stuff. And as soon as that happened, I was like, this is what I'm meant to do in life.
Very nice. The newbie gains, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
it's gains combined with actually doing something properly.
Yes.
So I did everything right.
It's kind of like somebody trying to lose fat for the first time, but they understand what a calorie deficit is and they can just get on with it. You know, it's the same with the training. Once you kind of know the overriding principles of what you need to do, you get on with doing that then, and then that's what's going to bring about the results. And obviously genetics will play a slight role in, you know, how fast someone might respond here and there, etc. But nobody cannot not build muscle, if that makes sense. And Jason, you were mentioning kind of before that happened, we'll say you were going to the gym and going on treadmills and doing ab workouts and bicep workouts. And it's funny because with Doc Fitness here in Ireland, we don't see any of that because we train all our clients every day, so they're doing stuff right. We like to think, at least. But if you go to a public gym or a commercial gym it might be once every few months that I'm not actually in the physical Doc Fitness gym, and I go to a public gym, I still see people doing the same shit over and over again. And these are the same people that will ask me on Instagram or an email us or whatever and say, I'm doing X amount in the gym. Why can't I build muscle? I'm like, you can't expect to build big fucking legs running on a treadmill. And, it's just this misinformation that's out there and people thinking that they're going to magically build muscle by lifting a few weights here and there. But, it's just, there's so many there's a lot of confusion involved, obviously, but there's a lot of beginner mistakes too. And I suppose just to set the scene in terms of like where we're going to go from here, what would you say from somebody who is a beginner to this, because it makes sense to start there, what would you say are the biggest mistakes for them? Is it just not having a plan whatsoever and doing what they think they need to do, or what would you say are the biggest mistakes you see from a muscle gain standpoint?
Oh, just everything. They're doing everything wrong because they're the beginners who aren't getting the results are just doing everything wrong. It's as easy as that. Honestly, like, if you go to, okay, let's picture this. Let's say you're in the gym. It's January 1st, 2019. So like half a year ago. Go to the gym, look around. The gym is packed. So many people, so many new people, so many beginners. So you look around and you look at those faces and look at what each one of those one of those people are doing, and then look at how much weight they're lifting. And then fast forward 1 year in the future. So January 1st, 2020. You see those same people and they're lifting the same amount of weight and they look exactly the same as they did last year. They made no changes. So a big problem I see is people are afraid to add weight. A lot of people think, okay, if I'm going to build muscle, I just need to have a lot of variation and always change my workout up for like muscle confusion. But it's actually the opposite. You're much better off finding a few key exercises and just adding 50 pounds to each one of those exercises over the course of the next year. If you can do that, you're going to build muscle as long as you're eating enough food and you're getting enough protein. So if you want to build muscle, the formula is very simple. It's get stronger in big compound movements, eat enough protein to grow. So I looked at the research, and this is what I've been preaching for a long time. You want at the very least, 0.82 grams per pound of protein. So if you're 200 pounds, that's at the very minimum 164 grams of protein per day. And then you want to eat in a caloric surplus so that the weight on the scale is going up. So if you do those three things, literally just focus on those three things, your program focuses on those three things, you're going to build muscle. So a lot of mistakes I see is people aren't focusing on all of those three things. So either they're not getting enough protein or they're not eating in enough surplus for the scale to actually go up. But the biggest mistake, and this is always the biggest mistake I see, is they're changing the program up too much. They're not getting stronger in the lifts. They're afraid to add weight, and they don't grow.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, it sounds like the way I used to be back in the day. I'd probably jump from whatever I kind of liked or seen on Google or whatever was promoted as like the new muscle building thing I need to do, but I was just jumping from program to program every second week, and then you'd never get used to doing a certain exercise because I was constantly changing it. And do you know,
I used to do that too. I would always be on T Nation every morning, whatever the new article was. If it was a cool program, I'm like, okay, after I finish this program this month, I'm going to do this program. And lo and behold, so this was actually after I built that first 27 pounds of muscle. I was program hopping for 4 years straight, and I kind of plateaued for 4 years straight. And then I was like, you know what? I haven't really made any progress for so long. I kind of came to terms with that. And I was like, let's go back to the basics and let's keep doing what works. And that was 2 years ago. I decided to go back to the basic principles. And then I finally started making a lot more progress again in my workouts. It's so funny how things work.
Yeah. And that T Nation website, I'd say every personal trainer has come across it at some stage, but I think its popularity has gone down a bit over the last few years because it's more or less just a site really pushing supplements based on who was writing the article type thing, and a lot of misinformation on it as well. But it's funny how you mentioned that, because now I've gotten some very good information off T Nation as well, but yeah, it's funny how the kind of cycles you go through. But in terms of that, even when you said that as well, Jason, I remember a time when I paid for my first online coach. It was unheard of back then, but I remember I got onto these guys over in London, I think it was. I won't name any names. I don't even know if they're still around these days, but their thing was to send you a different set of workouts every single week. So every Sunday, a new set of workouts would drop in your inbox, and you to go in and do them. And they were just insane, crazy amounts of exercises. You're talking 12 exercises per workout, and nearly 5 sets of every single thing. And I thought I needed to do that, and then it turned into nearly a cardio session in one way, but didn't really.
There's so much to do in so little time.
Yeah, but if you go back to those principles you just said a couple of minutes ago, we could literally shut off this podcast right now, and if people took those principles and tried to apply those overall, they'd make savage results, or they'd make savage progress. But again, it's all well and good saying lift heavier over time, eat caloric surplus, eat enough protein, but it's the nitty gritty getting down to do that people just struggle with massively. And I suppose, look, this is why we are in a position we are in. This is what we help people specifically with. But in terms of that overriding principle of doing more over time, Jason, for somebody who hasn't stepped foot in a gym, I always kind of do something, 3 full body workouts type thing, anywhere from 4 to 6 exercises, between 3 to 5 sets, between 8 to 12 reps. I know that those are big ranges to be thrown out to someone who hasn't a clue what they're at, but if they can start at the lower end of that and build up to that over a number of weeks, maybe change a variation here or there as the 6 to 8 weeks progresses, maybe you might change one little variable to keep it interesting. That's all they need to do literally for a year solid. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And as well, couple that with being in an actual surplus, so eating more food purposely with the goal of muscle gain, and making sure, as you said, you're getting your sufficient protein levels in. But
actually, everything that you just described, that's exactly how I built my first 27 pounds of muscle. That's how I did that transformation from September to Thanksgiving. Literally that.
Nice. 3
full body workouts, 6 exercises per workout, getting stronger, eating in that caloric surplus. It was literally the most simple plan ever, and it worked.
Yeah. And that's literally all beginners need to do. Like, if somebody's training 4 to 6 months doing just that, yeah, they'll definitely benefit from adding a 4th workout if they wanted to focus on more muscle groups and stuff. But like, how much more are they going to get from doing 4 and 5 massive workouts early on? Probably not that much compared to what they can just get from 3. But like, as that goes on past 1 or 2 years of consistent training, consistent of doing those principles, that's when things become a little bit more, I suppose, in depth. Like, you have to allocate how much work you're doing across the week, maybe a bit more smartly, because if you're hammering yourself with 3 body workouts a week and you're feeling bed up every week, that can kind of go against you in the long run. So I suppose, yeah, we're not going to dwell too much on the beginner phase stuff, Jason, because it is that easy. If you want to touch on a bit more, because I know you mentioned this in your actual book you've written as well, which we haven't talked about yet at all, but is there anything else you might think from the way you have things structured in your book that you want to add here before we move on to maybe more advanced stuff?
So in terms of beginner or intermediate stuff?
Yeah, I suppose is there any beginner points we're missing out on? I suppose maybe one question for you is, how does a beginner know they're actually gaining muscle?
So obviously, if you're getting stronger and the scale is going up, you're probably gaining muscle. You can take measurements, but you gotta, I think it's a lot better to get someone else's eyes on you. So just like ask a friend or a girlfriend or whatever, be like, okay, here's my picture from when I started, and this is me now. Does it look like I'm getting fatter, or does it look like I'm actually gaining muscle? Another huge indicator, like this is the easiest one, is look at the size of your neck. If your neck looks like it's getting bigger, because usually you have like a pencil neck when you get started. Not everyone, but a lot of guys will. If your neck is getting bigger and your waist is getting smaller, you're gaining muscle. In terms of like an actual, like if your program's good, honestly, like I made all that progress, and every beginner I've ever worked with made the best progress by just focusing on like 6 key exercises, compound lifts. So I don't even recommend beginners to do any like isolation exercises or anything, like, so no bicep curls, no flies, no like calves, no like lateral raises. Really just focusing on getting good at the 6 big movements, for big compound movements for your body. And if you do that 3 times a week, then I tell my clients, I'm like, listen, as long as you do those 3 times per week, you can go in the gym on another day if you want and do any of the isolation stuff that you want, or you can do isolation stuff at the end of the workout, but it's not really gonna be your big bang for your buck stuff. It's not going to be the stuff that's really going to make the biggest difference in you. The stuff that's going to make the biggest difference is just if we can add 50 pounds to each one of these big lifts by the end of the year, then that's what's really going to get you to where you want to be. It's going to get you from beginner to intermediate. It's going to get you to your first 20 to 30 pounds of muscle. So I look at the big compound movements as like actual movements and not exercises. And then that way we have a couple exercises to pick from. So if we look at starting at the lower body, knee dominant movements. So that's either like Bulgarian split squats or like lunges or squats, obviously front squats, back squats, Zercher squats, things like that. All you need to do is pick one from each category. Next is a hip hinge movement. So like a deadlift or Romanian deadlift, rack deadlift, something like that. Horizontal push. So bench press, weighted push-up, dumbbell bench press, something like that. A horizontal pull, so some kind of row variation, like chest-supported row, bent-over row. A vertical push, so dumbbell military press, barbell military press, something like that. And then a vertical pull, so like pull down or chin-ups or weighted chin-ups, weighted pull-ups, something like that. Just pick one from every single category, and then those are your 6 exercises. And your goal is to add 50 pounds to each one of those exercises. Very, very simple. And honestly, like with a program like that, even advanced guys can benefit from doing a full body for a couple months, like going back to the basics and just like focus on getting stronger in that. Obviously, like as you become more advanced, we probably wouldn't just train in like the 8 to 12 rep range every single workout. I would recommend something more like daily undulating periodization, so DUP. So every workout, so let's say you did 3 full body workouts a week. Maybe one of the workouts is 8 to 12 reps. Another workout is 6 to 8 reps, and another workout is 4 to 6 reps. And then that way we're hitting all the rep ranges there. But beginners can do that too after they've made probably gain their first 20 to 30 pounds, just to change things up. Then once you become more of an intermediate, honestly, if your program's still working, I would just say keep doing it. But obviously, as an intermediate, you might start to notice like, okay, my calves are lagging, or my upper arms are lagging, or I need a little bit more work in the rear delts or things like that. And that's where you really can be more of a sculptor. So when you're a beginner, it's the beginner phase, you're just building size. When you become an intermediate, that's where you really become a sculptor. A lot of my philosophies for building muscle, I've actually got from Dorian Yates, looking at Dorian when he was drug free, the way he trained and the way he built his body. And the reason behind that is a lot of his philosophies, I noticed went hand in hand with how I built my body, and everything just seemed very simple. So I just took what he did and kind of adapted it based on the science that we have now, which is pretty cool. So Dorian, when he first got started, he was doing full body workouts up until he was like 180 pounds. And he was at like 5'10", so almost like average height. So up until he was like 180 pounds, he did full body workouts, and then he switched to upper lower split, so he could kind of spread the volume out a little bit across the week, and spread the intensity out, because ultimately beginners, they get so strong that the workouts just crush you because you're lifting so much weight eventually. So sometimes it's better for recovery to split that up into like an upper lower split, or a push pull split, like push pull, or upper lower. And then from there, we can really focus on doing less exercises per workout, but putting more intensity in it, and then still chasing those strength gains. And then on top of this, we could add a little bit more isolation stuff. So like the big 3 isolation movements I always like to add are rear delt work, because then that makes your shoulders have that 3D look. So you turn sideways and your shoulders still look massive. I like to do calf work for obvious reasons, and then upper arm work for obvious reasons, obviously there. Those are like the big 3 areas where I like to isolate once we get to a certain point. And in all honesty, like natural guys, you could probably just stick training like that until you're like, let's say if you're 5'11", 6 feet, 5'10", something like that, till you get close to like 190, 195 pounds, and you pretty much reach your genetic potential as a natural. Like you can just keep training like that as an intermediate. Like I still train like that, and you've seen videos of me online, and I'm still making gains from that program. So why would I ever switch switch and do something else because I'm still making gains from it, right? For advanced guys, if my definition of advanced is basically guys who have reached their genetic potential and they're looking for a little bit more edge. And honestly, like if you're an advanced guy, you're probably only chasing like 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per year. But that adds up over time. Like it could add up over like 10 years, right? So most people, they never truly reach the advanced section. They never really truly need to train like an advanced guy. Like you find these, if you go to like these websites looking at like what these pro bodybuilders are doing, most people never need to do those programs. They can just stick with the basics. They could stick on a simple upper lower split and get great results.
No, fully agree. Like I've probably had my best personal gains from upper lower split as well after I was doing 3 full body workouts for years. And I did 3 full body workouts mainly because I thought that's what I had to do. And so a lot of what I read was centered around that. And then of course I dipped into like pure bro bodybuilding splits, like copying fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger and that kind of stuff, and Kai Green and those kind of people, and doing, you know, chest on a Monday, back on a Tuesday, legs or whatever it was at the time. But upper lower, I was able to, I still am. I still like literally milk that as much as I can. The only time I might change, and if I go up to a 5-day split, it'll still be an upper lower split. The 5th day is like an extra day for body parts I want to improve on if I'm not playing my current sport. When I'm playing my current sport, it goes way back down to 2, maybe 3 if we're not playing a game that weekend of, again, same principles we've gone through before, full body stuff. And even though that's performance based, the same overriding principle is there. It's all focused on those 6 main compounds that we talked about a few minutes ago. But again, like the upper lower, the upper lower still has your compounds. It just, as Jason said, as you said, there is just a couple of more isolation movements in there for more muscle groups you want to focus on. But probably the biggest thing with going from a 3-day to a 4-day is not the fact that now you're in the gym an extra day. It's that you're breaking up the workload across the week a little bit easier, because volume is one of the main drivers of hypertrophy, which is muscle gain. And if you're able to get in more work over 4 days than you are in 3 days, the 4 days is better for you. And if it suits your job, etc., family life, blah blah blah, like you might not be able to get in 4 days. So just because we're talking here about upper lower full body, there's different ways you can break that up, as long as we're still adhering to the kind of science behind that. And I suppose this kind of, I'm sequencing in, Jason, as well to, I suppose, the science behind that. What does the science tell us now, just for the listeners, in terms of like what way, like how frequent, what is best in terms of frequency for training a muscle group?
Honestly, looking at the science, it's still mixed. Like there's a new study that came out. I think Brad Schoenfeld was doing part of it. He's the main driver of all the hypertrophy research. And what he found was, if you equated volume, so let's say you trained a muscle group once a week and then trained a muscle group 3 times a week, but if you did the same amount of sets, reps, and weight, so there was no changes in muscle gain. So let me put this in perspective. So like, let's say you were bench pressing 100 pounds for 9 sets of 5 reps. Let's say that. So one group would do bench press 100 pounds, 9 sets of 5 reps once a week. And then the other group would bench press 100 pounds 3 times a week, 3 different workouts, but they would do 3 sets of 5 reps with that 100 pounds. What they noticed in the research is there was no changes in muscle growth. But I think the big problem with that is, if you're going to be able to do 9 sets of 5 reps with 100 pounds in one workout, if you spread it over 3 workouts and you do 3 sets of 5 reps in each one of those workouts, you're going to be able to use more than 100 pounds because you're recovering in between. You're not getting the fatigue. And if you do that, you're going to gain more muscle. So that's why I like spreading things apart and having a little bit more frequency, because we can pretty much maximize intensity. We can train, we can still get the same volume in, but we can use more weight. and that's going to allow us to build more muscle. So that's why I like splitting it up into like an upper lower split once you get stronger, because let's say you're doing 8 sets for each body part throughout the entire week. You could do those 8 sets in a single workout and use less weight, or you can do 4 sets on one workout and 4 sets on another workout and use more weight and probably increase your strength gains quicker. And if you remember the principles I talked about earlier, the goal is just to add strength to each one of those workouts. So what's going to add strength faster? Doing all those 8 sets in a single workout, or spreading it out over 2 workouts? It's pretty obvious, right? So we need to look at, okay, we have these 3 basic principles for building muscle. Now how can we kind of optimize this? And in my opinion, the way to optimize the strength gains, optimize adding weight to the bar without sacrificing form, is to spread the workouts out.
Yeah.
Or spread the workload out across the week.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you look at the way, like doing heavy sets of squats and then heavy sets of split squats straight after squats or something like that to get in 8 total sets in one workout, for me personally, because the way my leg length is, I just find that squats just crush me at times when I'm doing heavy sets. And if I'm doing RDLs in the same session, it's like my lower back just gets fired up so easily. Not in a bad way. I just be fatigued very quickly. It's easier for me then to put maybe 2 more or 3 more lower body movements later on in the week, so I can get more volume in, I'm fresher, I enjoy it more, and I can handle more weight, which again equates to more volume, which hopefully, if I'm in a surplus and I'm eating enough protein, that's better for muscle tissue gain. And again, like obviously we've crossed the threshold now past beginner stages, so if somebody is a ranked beginner listening to this and they're just lost, it's okay, because you can just rewind and go through the basics like we talked about. But when we get into sets and like looking at your training in that way, this is what we analyze as coaches. This is what I do for all my guys online as well. Like I analyze to the rep and set of what they do every single week. I've it all graphed out for them as well, so we can see, right, we're hitting X amount of sets here. How are we feeling? Are we recovered enough from that? Is this a muscle tissue that we want to keep focusing on for the next 12 to 15 weeks, or do we want to allocate more time into another one? Because I had one guy who had a newborn and his job was crazy busy. He was working shift work, so he was on a 4, sometimes 5 day a week split, and he had to come right back to 3 days. But he's still, instead of just kind of maintaining everything he had and focusing on and that side of things, bear in mind he's training for over 4 or 5 years, probably only the last year properly, really, though, to be fair. I put him on a 3 day split, and he just wanted to hammer his chest. So we added in a couple of extra exercises, sacrificed other exercises across the week because he can't just have it all. But his chest volume was up on 18, 19 sets per week by the time he finished his training block. So we started at 8 to 10 week 1 sets, and we tailored it right up to 20, while we kept everything else at least around those 8 to 10 sets. So we're kind of hitting a baseline. And I think that's, from what I understand, kind of what we currently know as well. Like, I suppose a good range to start at per muscle group is roughly around that 8 to 10 sets per week, and tailor that up to 18 to 20 sets, even beyond for some people, per week as well, depending on what muscle group you're trying to, let's say, grow. So like 10 sets week 1, 12 sets week 2, 14 sets week 3, 15, etc., etc. It all, like, this all depends on the length of your mesocycle as well, and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing a 4 week split, 6 weeks, do you take it? Is there a deload built in? All these other questions kind of come under this. But if there's anything there, Jason, that I'm kind of hinting at for yourself that you want to add to, just on the set front, like how much to do for each muscle group, etc., is there anything you'd like to add to all that? Or
So what I found is a lot of guys, or you see a lot of programs where it really preaches like adding a lot of volume over time. And I think the reason a lot of these people preach doing this higher volume is because a lot of guys just don't train with enough intensity. So they don't train with like pushing themselves hard enough. Like maybe they think they just did an 8 RM, but if we held a gun to their head, they only did they could have probably done like 12 reps or something. So a lot of people preach doing higher volume on their programs because these people aren't putting in enough intensity. So we need to get overload somehow. So what we do is we increase the volume, and that's how they get the results. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this high volume training is the only thing that ever worked for me. And it's because, no, well, the high volume training is the only thing that ever worked for you because you were too soft to actually push yourself hard enough to stimulate growth. So we need to do more sets. But honestly, like, based on like everything I've seen and talking to like a lot of like pro bodybuilders and fitness models, you talk to a lot of these guys and they actually built their bodies with more of like a moderate, even kind of low volume, but just really pushing the intensity and pushing themselves. Because a lot of people, they're afraid to overtrain. I don't know if it's like the media has like made people afraid to overtrain, but it's like people are afraid to push themselves. And I think it's a big problem that they have, and then they need to do higher volume. So for me, I would much rather, like, let's say we wanted to blow up the chest a bit more, I would maybe add one more set to the workout, one more set to the workout on the bench or on the horizontal pushing exercise, whether it's like bench or weighted push-ups or dumbbell bench, something like that, right? I would maybe add one more set to that, and then maybe add a set of flies in, or like two to three sets of flies in at the end of the workout too, just to get a little bit more stimulation to the chest. But I wouldn't add like a ton of volume. Like, honestly, you can grow by doing 2 heavy sets. Like, let's say you're doing an upper lower split. So let's say we want to grow the chest. We can make the chest grow in as little as 2 heavy all out sets twice a week on the chest. The chest will grow. Once the chest stops growing, then we need to change something. So we keep doing the program until it works. But this is like all out sets. Like, we put a gun to your head. You can do a lot more than you think possible. Obviously you're going to stop if your form starts to break down. But like, let's say you did 100 pounds for 8 reps, or let's say you did 100 pounds for 7 reps last workout. Your goal of this workout is to do 100 pounds for 8 reps. As long as your form isn't falling apart, because we don't want you to get injured, right? Once this stops working and you've increased the weight as much as possible, and you're not getting any more size, then I would add like maybe one more heavy set, and then see how that works over the next like 8 to 12 weeks. If growth stagnates, then maybe we'll start adding some flies later on. But for me, it's really an iterative process. It's keep doing what works until it's no longer working, and then make a small adjustment. And once you have that small adjustment, see if that works. If it's working, keep doing it until it doesn't work, and then we need to think of a change or make another change to find out something else that works. So I never program in adding volume just for the sake of volume, because if the weight's going up, then we're doing something right. Because the end goal is to make sure that weight is going up with perfect form, because then we're putting more tension into that muscle group. And if you look at the research, it's kind of hinting towards that tension is the biggest driver of signaling muscle growth. But then if you look at how people train, there's essentially, you're either going to add size by actually increasing the size of the tissue, which takes longer, or you can add size by getting like a really big pump and actually adding more glycogen and water essentially to the muscles so they look bigger. It's almost like filling up a balloon. But that's basically, it's almost temporary when you build muscle that way. So I would much rather focus on actually building more and bigger tissue of the muscle, and then that way it stays longer. So it takes longer to actually build muscle that way, but when you do build muscle that way, you look more dense, you're stronger, and you could take like 2 weeks away from the gym and still look jacked after those 2 weeks, as opposed to if you're training for a pump all the time with all this high volume, and after 2 weeks, it looks like you lost so much size because you lost a lot of the glycogen in the water in your muscle. So the balloon, it's kind of like you put a pin in the balloon, in the water balloon, and all the water's coming out.
Yeah, like if you look the same way you do walking around, that's when you know you're building muscle tissue, rather than just looking a bit swelled after the gym just because you've got a pump in the gym. And I think that's what most Instagram people do these days. They go in and get a massive pump and show themselves doing a simple workout then on Instagram, thinking, oh, this is what I need to do, because you see very little information out there from some influencer on Instagram that is showing fucking 20 exercises or 5 exercises in a little mini circuit, and you have to do this to build muscle, when it's bullshit, like, because you're using fairy tale weights, And just something to clarify, Jason, as well, I suppose, when I was talking about adding volume for my guys, like, I make sure that the intensity is at where it needs to be. So we work off RPE, how many reps I've left in the tank, etc., etc. And although for the guys that we train in the gym versus my guys online, I can't see how hard my guys online are push themselves, but we use all these measurements like photos, key measurements, rough estimation of body fat levels, etc., to see how they're progressing over time. And then once those indicators are going the right way and we see the training files are getting stronger, we know we're doing things right. But volume is kind of added on a needs-be basis then. So you were saying you like to kind of prefer maybe you're like the lower end ranges of kind of what the science is saying. So like if you look at is the 2017 meta-analysis by Brad Schoenfeld and James Krieger on the dose response relationship between volume, so weekly training volume, and muscle hypertrophy. They came out with kind of like a recommendation based on like roughly 10 sets per week, anywhere up to 20 sets per week. But then they also counteract that by saying some will respond better by going 10 sets and going harder, whereas some will respond better to 20 sets. So even I found for myself, because I play sport and I do a lot of kind of endurance-based work for sport and stuff, I require a lot more lower body volume compared to my upper body volume to grow in that area. And when I mention volume, I'm not just adding really, really lightweight sets. These are still heavy sets where I'm absolutely spent at the end of that training cycle, and it's built up week by week depending on how I'm recovered. So that's probably getting a bit too deep into where I'm going. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that some will respond better with lower volume, some may respond better with higher volume, some might like the lower volume, some might like the higher volume. So you have to kind of work with clients on a needs-to-be basis for that too, because we're never going to be able to give exact set recommendations, Jason, but people again need to take, I suppose, the overriding principles of what we're trying to get across with it. And it's funny because one thing that we never even got into is when we were mentioned at the start, like a beginner, here's 6 exercises, go do these for a year, come back. Where is that? That's never promoted anymore. When do you see that on Instagram? When do you see that kind of promoted in a blog anymore? It's not like, and even speaking to you on it now, I can't remember the last time I've actually seen it, because it nearly should be common knowledge for people in a way, and people might find it going deep into Reddit forums and stuff like that, but it's not publicly put out there. Look, beginners, do this, you'll be fine. When you start to stagnate or you need help, ask someone for help. Right? Sometimes it can be that simple. Anything to add on that?
Well, if you go to my Instagram, I do talk about that sometimes, every now and then.
Yes, of course.
The problem is, it seems too simple for people, and it's not a sexy subject to talk about. It's not going to get a lot of clicks to the website. It's not going to get a lot of views on your video.
Exactly.
It's because it's just too simple. People want to be entertained in this day and age, and it's not really entertaining to talk about doing the same workout for like a year straight, three times a week, same workout every single time. It's not sexy.
And even though like that is what you need to do, adherence is a massive factor of that. Like if adding in bicep curls and changing exercises every few weeks, not every feckin' workout, but every few weeks, if that caused that person to stick to the overall principles, that is a massive plus in our eyes. And that's the exact way we program. I don't really keep workouts bare unless their schedule really, is super tight, just for a variety's sake and for enjoyment and adherence. Because at the end of the day, if somebody can't stick to the workout, what's the point? Because they're not going to do it. But Jason, we talked a lot about the beginners, what they need to do, to a little bit into like upper lower split 4 days a week. We talked a bit about sets. You were talking about splitting up 8 sets across the week, like doing lower body work on a Monday, lower body work on a day near the end of the week. Is there anything else you think we should touch on there before I might go into a few rapid fire questions for you? Is there anything else on the kind of more intermediate stuff we haven't talked about? Probably we've kept it all to a training standpoint, really. We haven't really touched on the nutritional aspect that much, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So with the biggest difference with nutrition between a beginner and a beginner and intermediate guy who want to build muscle is just the amount of calories you can consume. And the reason behind that is muscle can only grow so quickly. So your first year of training, research shows you can gain between like 20 to 30 pounds of muscle. Obviously there's outliers on both sides, but it's looking like a lot of people in the middle of the bell curve are like 20 to 30 pounds of muscle your first year of training. Second year of training, that cuts down in half. So 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. In order to gain 1 pound of muscle, it's about 3,500 calories. But because muscle growth can only happen so quickly, well, then we need to make sure that we're not overeating that speed of growth. So what I mean by that is you see the guys who go on like this huge bulk where they're eating like 6,000 calories per day, and they are gaining muscle, but most of the weight they're gaining is fat. I think this is kind of counterintuitive because once you get to a certain body fat percentage, your body preferentially builds fat instead of building muscle. So I like people to stay as lean as possible and still build that muscle. And in order to do that, you need to eat at the speed of muscle growth. So if you look at that, to gain 30 pounds of muscle, that's essentially 30 pounds over the entire year. That's an extra 30 times 3,500. That's an extra whatever that is in calories. 35,000 times 3. Spread it over the entire year. So it's only a cup, maybe it's an extra like 250 to 500 calories per day. And as long as the scale's going up at that decent rate, then you're eating enough. You might need to eat a little bit more because as you start to eat more, maybe your metabolism increases, and as you gain weight, your metabolism increases as well. So then you need to eat a bit more calories. But at least it gives us a good starting point. But then the second year training, you can only gain 10 to 15 pounds of muscle. So we don't want to overeat that growth as well. Maybe we could do it by a little bit, but we don't want to overeat that growth by too much, which means it's going to take us less calories or less extra calories in order to build that muscle for the entire year. So that's the big difference there. But the principles still stay the same. You're still eating in a caloric surplus. You still need to be getting enough protein to support the growth, and you still need to be making gains in the gym. So adding strength to these big lifts in the gym. So the only thing that really changes nutritionally is you can't. So like my first year training, I was able to eat 3,000 calories a day, and seems like I built no fat and I just built all muscle. Second year of training, I was eating 3,000 calories per day, and I was building more fat than muscle. So obviously I should have lowered my calories to something like maybe like 2,800 per day or something like that. So that's the big changes as you gain muscle.
Okay, perfect. Like the only thing that kind of we go by in terms of the only thing I'd add that would be a little bit different to that, Jason, will be in order to synthesize a pound of muscle tissue, it's between roughly 600 to 800 calories. But overshooting it on the 3,500 mark, it ensures you're gaining that pound, if that makes sense. So like Well, there's 3,500 calories roughly in a pound of fat. There's slightly less in a pound of muscle, but because it takes more energy to store in the body. Oh, what way am I explaining this? I'm explaining this completely arseways. There's hypothetically some people are saying out there, and this is what we used to go by. In order to gain a pound of muscle tissue, you're overshooting your rate of gain by like 100%. So if somebody can gain, you were saying, a pound a month, 2 pounds a month, whatever it is, you'd aim for 4 pounds on the actual scales to make sure you're getting that pound. But again, what I found over time is there's actually no hard science behind that. So do you still go by 3,500 calories in terms of like, that's how you work out how much pounds you want to gain? Is that what you go by?
No, actually. So what I'll do is, if they're a beginner, we'll aim to gain like 5 pounds on the scale per month.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like a complete beginner. The thing is, with a lot of beginners though, they gain most of their muscle in the first like half of the year. So we kind of need some people in the first 3 months of the year. So it all really depends on the individual. But let's say we'll aim for like 4 to 5 pounds on the scale per month. So it's not like crazy quick growth, but we're still adding weight. But we also need to adjust. Like if they look like they're getting like a little chubby, then we'll cut down a bit. Still focus on getting stronger, and then increase the calories again. If it's someone who's an intermediate, generally I like them to gain like 2 pounds a month on the scale. It's a lot easier to do that because then we can make adjustments. Like logically, it just makes more sense to do that because the process is a lot easier than just trying to figure out exact calories. Because a lot of people, it's different. And on top of this, really, like everyone tracks their calories a bit different. So there's a lot of variables there. But the one variable that kind of stays the same is if we can look at the scale and then look at the person and look at the weights that they're lifting. As long as their weights are going up, they're not gaining too much or too quickly on the scale, and they look like they're still building muscle, then we're doing something right.
Yeah, perfect. No, it's exactly in line with. Did you see the recent paper that came out? I think only last week on like practical off-season bodybuilding recommendations for natural lifters. I think it was Eric Helms and is it Juma Iraqi? There was 2 other guys, Peter Fitchison, I think is his name. I don't know if you've seen it, but the recommendations are basically what you said there. So a 10 to 20% surplus is just a much easier way to kind of go by, rather than saying, all right, there's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, there's roughly this amount in a pound of muscle, let's do it that way. It still doesn't work out calorie for calorie when you go adding that into a week. So that's why you were saying earlier on you were adding X amount per week. But their recommendations that's actually like reviewed now, it's 10 to 20% surplus, depending on if somebody's beginner to more advanced, or else it's like 0.25 to 0.5%, 0.5% of body weight gain per week. And that's I think that roughly comes out on the exact same figures you were just talking about there. So it's cool that we have, an actual paper now to kind of back up this thing a little bit more, but it's stuff that we've been doing for years. We know it works anyway. But it really is down to that. You tweak as you need to go along. If somebody's getting too much, we pull back, etc., etc. And Jason, like, would you have any ranges for if somebody was at the stage where it's kind of like, okay, now I've gained a bit too much fat? Like, do you have any like cut-off points for that, or what way do you do that? Like to maybe go into like a small fat loss phase or anything like that?
Yeah. So I don't work with anyone who goes on stage. That's not my thing. I don't really enjoy that as much. But the people I work with are more just guys who want to look great year round, and they want to do that so it impacts their social life in a positive way. So the way we do that is I get these people to stay lean year round, and the reason we do that is because then when they're lean year round, they feel confident all the time. And they can go out with friends and like go to a pool party and still look great or like have the woman over, get naked, still look awesome for that, and not have to worry about, oh, I'm bulking right now. Sorry, I don't usually look like this.
Yeah.
So here's what I do. So once their 6-pack turns into a 4-pack, then what we do is we do a mini cut, and we cut down until they have a 6-pack, or maybe even some of them an 8-pack, depending on how lean they want to get, and how quickly that can happen. So that mini cut is like 4 to 6 weeks. Then we start bulking again slowly, and we keep going up until that 6-pack turns into a 4-pack again, and then we cut again. And I call this the lean bulk cycle. So we just cycle through this. So as soon as your 6-pack becomes a 4-pack, it's time to cut. As soon as you're like lean enough, feeling great, getting good pumps in the gym again, then we can start bulking up slowly again. So it's different for everyone, but generally it's like 4 to 6 weeks of cutting, and then 6 to 12 weeks of bulking up. And that seems to be the sweet spot for the lean bulk cycle for staying lean year round, but building muscle as well. And honestly, if you do this right, you'll probably find a range of weight where you're like maybe a 5 to 10 pound range of your weight, where you're always basically within that 10 pounds range, and you just stay within that range of weight for years, but you just end up building more muscle. You end up getting leaner.
Yes, exactly. That's more or less what I do as well. So it's cool to hear. It's funny to explain it that way. When the 6-pack goes to a 4-pack, it's time to cut. No, it's good. It's very good. It's a very easy way to understand that as well. And you mentioned about the weight staying the same. Yeah, like it's even from your training and my own training are probably the same as me. Like if you're as lean as you were 2 years ago, but you're 2 pounds heavier in the scales or 4 pounds heavier in the scales or whatever it is, you know that it's just a nice indicator, like, okay, nice, I'm doing everything right. And that's kind of over time, you see that kind of compounding over time. So no, it's cool. It's cool to hear, Jason, as well, that you're doing literally exactly what we do with clients as such. But again, it's all dependent on the person and what they want from it too. But yeah, I wouldn't be ever bringing someone to like lots of body fat gain. I'd never. 6-pack territory is kind of, if that starts to go, we'll pull back. I do have some guys that want to go higher just because they think that the bigger they get, the cooler they're going to look in clothes type thing. But it's very rare I get that. Maybe 1 or 2 clients even the last 2 years have had that. But after talking to them for a while and educating them the fact that, look, it just might be better to do it X, Y, and Z way, they eventually are like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then we just pull back a bit, go forward again, pull back a bit.
And the thing is, when you're leaner, you also look bigger. So an example of this is a couple of years ago, I went on a trip to Nicaragua, and before that trip, I lost like 20 pounds over the course of a couple months. And my mom was looking at pictures of me in Nicaragua, and she texted me because we were posting it online. And she texted me, and she was like, "Hey, you've been bulking up?" And I was like, "No, I actually lost 20 pounds since you last saw me." And she was like, "Oh, wow, like you just look so much bigger." And that's the funny thing about it. People don't realize, they think they need to add weight, but essentially if they just get leaner, they'll look the way that they pictured in their heads.
Yes, exactly. Jason, fantastic to date on this episode. We're nearly an hour in, so I'm going to jump into some rapid fire questions for you. We could go super deep into these questions, but I will try and keep them as short and to the point as we can. These are ones that I asked yesterday on Instagram. I always like to get some listeners' questions in there, and these were the first 3 that I took. So, first one, I want to get really lean, but I also want to get big as well. How do I do that? It's kind of like they want both. What do they do?
Yeah. So you want to get lean first, and then just focus on that lean bulk cycle that I just talked about.
Perfect. Should I take creatine?
Yes, every day, regardless if you work out or not, regardless who you are. My mom is in her 50s, and I have her taking creatine just because of the benefits of it. So yes, and if you're not responding, take more. And the only creatine I recommend is creatine monohydrate.
What's more important for muscle gain? I'm going to open a can of worms here. Diet or training?
Probably training to stimulate the growth, because I see guys with bad diets who can still gain muscle.
And what was that quote I heard a couple of years back? The training or the nutrition is permissive to the training. So like the nutrition supports the training, if that makes sense. So like you build muscle by the training, but the nutrition supports that. So like you can't have kind of one without the other type thing. Like if you're doing all the training in the gym but you're not eating enough, you're not going to gain as much as you could if you're in a slight surplus versus not being in a surplus, is probably what I'm trying to say.
Well, here's how I look at it. If you're not training and you eat for muscle growth, like you eat in a caloric surplus, you get all that protein, you're just going to gain fat.
No two ways about it, really.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason, anything else you'd like to add to wrap up with things? I know, look, there's so many areas we could have went down, but that's the joys of having short time frames. It may have you back on in the future if we wanted to dive into more of the nutritional aspect of things or whatnot. But is there anything you'd like to round out this episode with or leave listeners with? Sure.
So we only touched the surface on here today. You asked some great questions. If you want to go deeper and get the actual how of what exactly to do, you can grab a copy of my book, Muscle. It's free. You just cover the shipping and handling. So you can get your free copy by going to freemusclebook.com and get the proven program for building muscle.
Excellent. I'll pop that link, guys, in the show notes page as well. All Jason's details will be there, guys. But give him a follow on Instagram, because all his stuff he produces, it's literally like, here, this is what you need to fucking do. And I love the type of content, like, 'cause it's no more than what I produce myself, but sometimes it's so easy to just let skim over that you don't realize how effective this stuff is. So Jason, thank you very much for coming on. If there's any other links that you want me to share, let me know before you go. But is your Instagram probably your main platform?
Yeah, at JMax Fitness on Instagram. All one word, JMax Fitness.
Perfect. As I said, I'm going to pop that into the show notes with the website, etc., everything else. And Jason, thank you very much for coming on, buddy.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. This was great.
So guys, that was Jason from JMax Fitness, and the show notes for this episode are going to be on docfitnessonline/episode 31. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, the link will be in the description box for that anyway, if you're looking to give Jason a follow or check out his free book. Lastly, thank you again for tuning in wherever you're listening to this from. I hope you have a good day, and we shall chat to you soon.